All right, so there is not a lot to know about this artery known as this is one of the most thickest branch right here. So this right here is known as the thoracic artery, and it extends from the point at which the aorta ends, so aortic arch ends. So we know the fact that the aortic arch ends approximately at the level of the T3 right here. So this is T3, and it originates all the way from T3 and goes all the way down to T12. So T12 might be somewhere here, and it changes into the lumbar part or the abdominal aorta. So the lumbar part, the portion of the thoracic aorta that is in close contact with the lumbar region, is also known as the abdominal aorta. So we have the thoracic aorta that rises from T3 to T12, and then we have the abdominal aorta. So that's how the ascending and the aortic arch, it progresses all the way downwards. So the main things to consider here whenever we describe a thoracic aorta is the fact that it has a lot of branches and it has a lot of relations. It's one of the more complex type of great vessels. So as we can see here, the main, visually we can see it lies at the posterior aspect of the heart. So it's one of the most posterior arteries, and it's in close association intimately in relation posteriorly to the vertebral column. And then there are a lot of organs of the mediastinum that is in close vicinity with, so namely these. So we can see the first thing here. Let us go in our usual protocol. The bones, and then we have the arteries, and then we have the veins, and then we have the lymph nodes or the nerves, and lastly we have the organs or the muscles. So the first thing that we consider here is the bone. So the one of the bones that is in close relationship, as we can see here, is the vertebra on the posterior side. And the next thing that we can notice is the fact that so that's one of the bony relation. That's the only bony relation that we can see here. The next thing that we can observe is the artery. So the artery that is in close relation is actually 9, because there are no arteries that you can see that are in close relation with the thoracic aorta, because that's the only artery that's one of the biggest one. So in terms of veins, we can see that we have the hemiazygous and the azygous vein right here. So yeah, just give me a second right here. Okay, so that's the hemiazygous, and then we have the azygous vein that's in close relation with the thoracic aorta. And in terms of nerves, we have the vagus nerve and the plexus that's surrounding the nerve plexus that surrounds the esophagus. Another thing that we can notice here is a small vein in green, a small vessel here in green known as a thoracic duct. And this one is the major lymph node of the posterior mediastinum. So that was the vessels, the arteries, the bones, and the veins. Moving on towards the organ relations in terms of organs. So the fact that it covers most of the mediastinum, most of the mediastinal organs are in relation with the aorta, with the thoracic aorta. The first thing we can observe here is the heart, although it's not in a direct relation, because most of the heart is covered by the pericardium. So there is like a barrier between the heart and the thoracic aorta, although we can see that's also in intimate relation with the hilum of the lung. So hilum of the lung is on more like an anterior relation as opposed to a lateral relation, because if you place the lung here, if you place the lung somewhere over here, you can see that the hilum projects right here and not like towards the posterior side. So those were the lungs. Inferiorly we have the diaphragm, and posteriorly we all know that there is esophagus. And whenever posterior mediastinum comes to your mind, you should relate it with esophagus. So esophagus, and then we have the diaphragm, and then we have the heart, then we have also the lungs that are basically, the relations that are on the top of our heads when it comes to thoracic aorta.